Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So Insider Magazine issue 222 is in mailboxes and it features not one but two pieces of exclusive fiction. One of them is the first of the Phase 3 High Republic short stories, at least the ones in Star Wars Insider Magazine, and the other one is what, as far as I can count now, the 43rd short story related to the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi. It's called Valnir Laizhu, pronunciation, who knows, by Richard Dinnick, and it is a little bit of a fun story with a cameo by a character who goes unnamed, but who is absolutely 100% Lando Calrissian, and this is a full spoiler podcast, by the way. It isn't spoiling anything to say that this is Lando because it's perfectly obvious that this is Lando. The character is described as always keeping his helmet on, has a certain flirtatious way about him, and the character of Valnir, who is described as young and naive, has a penchant for falling for scoundrels and is utterly and completely in love with this character. This character also says at one of the crisis points in the story that no one should be in this hellhole and wants to see Valnir get out of there as quickly as possible. Now, as you may have gathered, this is all taking place within Jabba's palace, and it's taking place not necessarily during the events of Return of the Jedi, but certainly during the events leading up to Return of the Jedi, in that Lando has already been embedded in Jabba's palace by this point. Valnir is a talented singer and gymnast who was robbed blind by a boyfriend and has wound up working at Jabba's palace. Meanwhile, Laizhu, pronunciation again, is a talented chef who had a restaurant on Tatooine but got behind on tribute payments, a very mafia-like thing, and now is having to work off the debt, except, of course, that the interest on the debt keeps going up and it's more than the stipend that she gets, so she's basically condemned to a life of servitude. I swear, I don't know what it is about Star Wars these days, but the more I watch and read various Star Wars storytelling, it's starting to feel like it's even getting closer and closer to real-life analogs. Or maybe I should say present-day analogs, right? Like the original Star Wars movies were telling the story of the Vietnam War from a different perspective, but the Vietnam War, like we had gotten out of the war a couple years prior to the first Star Wars movie being released. This is almost contemporaneous with stuff that's happening in the world. But I digress, maybe a little bit. So in the story, a very rich off-worlder comes to pay tribute to Jabba and try to figure out how he can get into the spice business. And that's fantastic and brings whole crates full of gems from every corner of the galaxy. Jabba apparently thinks this is fantastic and says, hey, let's go take a cruise. We'll go over to the Sarlacc pit and throw some debtors in there, which, is not Laizhu this time around, and it won't be in the future. There's also a bit of a name check for Boba Fett in the sense that there's a Fire Spray class ship in Jabba's hangar, and it did put me in mind of a question that it was pretty darn dangerous of Lando to be in Jabba's palace, not for, all the obvious reasons, but for the fact that Boba Fett could recognize him. Boba Fett could identify him. And you don't even need a deep knowledge of Star Wars storytelling to know that, because they shared scenes together in The Empire Strikes Back. So yeah, it was definitely even more dangerous for Lando, more fraught as far as this whole cockamamie scheme to rescue Han Solo went. But the story itself shows one of Jabba's accountants stealing from the not yet cataloged supply of gems, and Valnir gets the idea to steal some of the gems too, and Lando, upon discovering that this is happening, doesn't rat her out, and not only that, but just says, yeah, go. And she thinks that he's gonna blackmail her or use it against her or something, but yeah, Lando's obviously not gonna do that, which then makes Valnir fall even harder for him. But ultimately she and Laizhu are able to get out, not after some initial additional drama happens, and with unfortunately less loot than would have been fun for the story. I would have liked to have seen them get away with a little bit more than they actually did, but what are you gonna do? It's still a neat little story, and again, it was great to have Lando passing through it, and the interactions between him and Valnir were very fun, and to have those thoughts about Lando and Boba Fett and just how dangerous it was for Lando, considering that additional aspect, that was kind of a welcome little thing that occurred to me as I was reading the story too. So that is what I've got to share with you about Valnir and Laizhu from the 222nd issue of Star Wars Insider Magazine, and that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.